Hey, hi, and hello, I'm Mazriel, and welcome to my Seat of the Triumvirate Dungeon Journal. Returning from Legion, Seat is a 4-boss dungeon with a linear layout and features heavy shadow damage, dots, and bleeds. As with all guides in the Dungeon Journal series, we're going to focus more on individual mobs and abilities, as much has changed since the dungeon was first released. The dungeon starts in the fight arena for Zurral the Ascended, and you'll need to kill 4 merciless subjugators chaining into the sky in order to start the boss fight. To clear the way, we'll be fighting Famished Broken. Rupture is a passive that causes them to explode upon death, dealing AoE damage. Shadowguard champions are tank busters with Relentless Pursuit, a charge that inflicts physical damage and applies a bleed. This effect stacks. The charge is triggered by distance from their target, so tanks should be mindful to stay in melee range to prevent it. Battle Rage is a stack and enrage. It can and should be soothed. Merciless subjugators cast Chains of Subjugation, which chains everyone in the party, inflicting high shadow damage and greatly reducing speed. This can be broken with root breaking spells such as Blessing of Freedom and immunities. Do this to remove pressure from your healer. Leeching Void absorbs incoming healing and drains health from the target while healing nearby allies. If you're in a less confident group, I strongly advise to pull a little slower, as the mix of subjugators, champions, and exploding broken can easily wipe the party. Tanks and DPS need to be mindful of defensives, and healers, you gotta be ramped up and ready with your CDs. Once everything's dead, the boss RP automatically starts. Zurral is a tank mechanic boss with large area denial, powerful busters, and adds that need to be kept away from him. A Void Slash is a 3-combo physical tank buster that deals shadow damage on the 3rd hit. Chunks health, but overall, not very scary. A Decimate is when he leaps to a targeted character and drops a growing puddle that blocks off a large area. And this needs to be baited to the edge of the arena to keep the fighting area clear. The Null Palm is a large frontal cone. Needs to be dodged. Oozing Slam. Zurral slams the ground, damaging the party and applying a shadow dot. Shadowy lines will travel from him and spawn coalesce voids that will explode with dark expulsion upon reaching him, damaging the party and applying another dot. Tanks, you have to move the boss away from the voids, while DPS CC and cleave them down. Killing voids will drop puddles, but it's more important to kill them than to worry about perfect placement here. Crashing Void. Zurral will pull in players in any remaining voids. Voids will buff him and damage the party, so they need to be dead before this is cast. He then unleashes his energy, knocking back and damaging the rest of the party. And that's the entire fight. The room can get tight, but otherwise Zurral isn't that scary. Once dead, you need to talk to Illyria to move to the next part of the dungeon. You'll need to kill the 4 Rift Wardens holding open the Void Wrist found around this next part of the dungeon in order to unlock the second boss. The Rift Wardens have 3 separate mechanics to be mindful of. In the tank and healer, you need to be paying attention when pulling one. First and foremost, stabilize. Moving the Warden 30 yards away from the Rift causes it to become unstable, which then pulses damage to the party. Rift Essence afflicts targeted players with Essence of the Void Rift, increasing their shadow damage taken. This is a magic dispel, and with the amount of magic rot going on in this pull, you need to keep these cleansed. Rift Tear. Void expulses from the Rift Warden, inflicting AoE shadow damage to all enemies, and additional shadow damage on enemies within 5 yards of impact. And this will continue to happen for as long as the Warden remains alive, so dodge the puddles, survive the rot. DPS, the Warden is definitely going to have to be your priority here. You'll be pulling the following mobs as you make your way through the Wardens. Ruthless Rift Stalkers will cast Backstab, which creates clones to stab 2 random players in the back, inflicting physical damage and causing a bleed. These bleeds need to be managed by healers, as they'll start to hammer players in higher keys. A Shadow Mend is when they teleport to a nearby location and begin self-healing, and this should be on a kick rotation. The Ravenous Umbral Fins have the passive buff Devouring Frenzy, so melee attacks will heal the caster. And this sounds scarier than it actually is, just keep them in a cleave group and DPS them down. The Dark Conjure spam Umbral Bolt, a simple bolt for shadow damage. This should be on a kick rotation, but not if it means missing Summon Void Caller, which summons a new Void Caller if the previous one has been killed. Speaking of, Bound Void Callers are the Conjurer's minions, and they have the passive Pulsing Void, which pulses party-wide AoE damage while alive. On its own, it isn't too terribly difficult, but it can kill players that drop too low, so DPS, you're going to want to try to prioritize burning this thing out. Tanks, you need to watch that mitigation when you're pulling the Umbral War Adepts, as they cast Void Bash, a magical tank buster, and knockback. Void Burst summons 2 lines of puddles that need to be dodged before they explode for damage. Clear the rifts and keep an eye on any walking packs as you prepare for Saprish is a hunter boss with 2 pets, Darkfang and Shadewing. All 3 share a health bar, each have different mechanics you want to watch out for. Saprish has the passive buff Rending Void that causes its melee attacks to deal additional shadow damage. Tanks that are weak to magic need to ensure to prioritize keeping their mitigation up. Void Bomb is when he throws bombs that will explode and apply a shadow dot to the party when touched. These need to be baited together by players, but without overlapping each other. Phase Dash is when he creates void shades that dash towards players and will detonate any void bombs they hit. And it's important to use this to clear all the bombs you can before he casts Overload, which releases a massive blast Blast, which inflicts shadow damage and ignites all the bombs. This back and forth with the bombs is the primary gimmick of the fight. You have to be clearing them or you will wipe the party and probably break your key. And while this is happening, the pets are keeping you busy. Darkfang casts Shadow Pounce, which is when he jumps on a random player and applies a bleed. That's going to be for the healers to manage. Shadewing will cast Dread Screech, which releases a piercing screech, inflicts shadow damage, and disorients players. There's really not much else to interrupt during this fight, so this is going to be your high priority kick. Don't let it go off. The dance here really isn't all that hard, so long as DPS pay attention to range kicks and are baiting bombs. Healers watch Darkfang's bleed and big AoE ramps, and the tanks, you got to maintain your position so you can bait phase dash without moving too much and keep the cleave group tight. There's not much new trash between Saprish and the third boss. Void-infused destroyers are big and dangerous mechs that cast Eruption, which marks multiple players with a large circle before exploding, damage everyone inside for shadow damage, and applying a magical dot, while also knocking them into the air. Targeted players have to spread to avoid overlapping with anyone else. Void Cleave is a wide cone that inflicts shadow damage to all enemies in front of the caster. It needs to be dodged. Dire Void Benders will cast Abyssal Enhancement. This is a buff that causes melee attacks to unleash void energy in a cleave. This is a high priority kick to minimize party damage. The Grand Shadow Weavers have Gate of the Abyss, which summons a void gate that pulsates orbs that need to be dodged during the fight. Void Infusion is an unkickable channel that deals ticking shadow damage. There's a lot of rot when you're pulling these guys. Just be mindful of how many you take on at one time. Clear the area and get ready for the next boss fight. Viceroy Nezhar flips between a large area denial and ad phase. Stay flexible and you'll be able to take him out pretty easily. The fight starts with Mind Blast, a powerful magic bolt that needs to be in a kick rotation. It can be spammed pretty quick and hits like a truck, so watch to ensure you're not overlapping interrupt. Gates of the Abyss are the same as the Shadow Weavers before. It'll open two gates that pulsate orbs that need to be dodged. Mass Void Infusion infuses players with void energy, inflicting shadow damage every 1 second for 5 seconds. Umbral Tentacles will summon void tentacles from underneath the ground, and that will repeatedly target random players and channel Mind Flay for high damage. Healers need to be ramped and ready for a spike in damage, while tanks move the boss to each tentacle so DPS can cleave them down. Repulse is when Nezhar teleports to the center of the arena, knocks players back, and collapses void energy inward, forming a void storm. You'll want the tentacles to be killed before this happens, as anyone caught in the storm will be taking lethal damage. While this is channeling, the party will take pulsating damage, so healers need to be ready for steady rot. And that's really the fight. A bit of a bullet hell mixed with some important tank positioning, but overall not too complicated. Burn him down, and after Nezhar falls, there's nothing standing between you and the last boss. The Fallen Lura is an extremely dangerous tank fight, and if there hasn't been any fixes since the beta, I do expect some unsuspecting parties to wipe without knowing why. Immediately upon pull, Lura will cast Notes of Despair, which summons void color musical notes around the room. Dirge of Despair deals party-wide shadow damage and causes all Notes of Despair to do the same, so healers need to be ready for a pop of damage and then steady rot. Tanks need to try to move Lura forward a bit to make room for it Disintegrate, which are 3 high damage beams that revolve around the boss and need to be avoided revolving door style. Abyssal Lance. As of writing this guide, you will not see any real notification about this ability. There's no cast bar, no alert in the timeline, no voice line. Throughout the fight, Lura will consistently open void portals, and once she's reached 3, she'll fire a bolt at the tank for high damage. Currently, the only way to track this is by either watching the portals way above her head, where your camera never really is, or by the buff on her frame. Tanks have to always be watching this because it absolutely chunks in higher keys and does overlap with every other mechanic she casts. Discordant Beam targets 3 players with a frontal shockwave. Targeted players need to move between Lura and Note of Despair, as the beam will also silence them, which means they'll stop radiating damage. This can target tanks and healers. Grim Chorus creates large circles around the Notes of Despair and need to be moved out of the way, and then pulses heavy damage and applies anguish until destroyed. Siphon Void. Illyria will interrupt casts of the Symphony of Eternal Night, which stuns Lura and causes her to take 200% more damage. This is a burn phase where you should send all your CDs, including Lust. Backlash. When Lura breaks free from Siphon Void, she unleashes a wave of void energy, inflicting shadow damage, knocking players back, and now we start from the top of the fight. And that's really the full dance. So long as you're watching for that buster, ready for damage amps, and silencing notes correctly, you will make it to the end. I hope you guys enjoyed the guide. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, even a comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.